with that, going to introduce our guest speaker here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to move things out of the way here for us. I'm going to introduce you, Richard, and then turn off the screen share in a second. And this is our guest for today, Richard Hirschhaut, Director of the American Jewish Committee, Chief Strategist, Principal Spokesperson in advancing AJC's global advocacy mission here in Southern California. American Jewish Committee is the Dean of American Jewish Organizations, and Richard is a long active career, 30 years in civil rights, humanitarian and Jewish communal advocacy, serving senior professional roles with the ADL, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, American Friends of Rambam. And Richard, you and your wife Susan and your sister-in-law Shirley Jasper, well known to us at Hollywood Temple Bethel because of your late father-in-law and father Alex Satmari, and you mentioned also Violet Satmari, your mother-in-law, mother and mother-in-law. Alex used to grace the front row of the chapel right in front of me every Shabbat, and he had, and this is very appropriate for us maybe, he had the unique if troubling distinction of being treated as a Jewish slave labor by the Hungarian army during World War II. And then as a Hungarian enemy prisoner of war by the Soviets. So he was damned this way and damned that way, which may be a metaphor for the Jewish condition throughout much of history. And so I'm going to just pull up one thing on the screen and just show you, with this, what odd situation we're in today, that I see this. I'm going to talk about the problem of education, really, to start with. Randy Weingarten, head of the American Federation of Teachers, Jewish, very Jewish, married to a rabbi. Okay, can't get too much Jewish than that, other than being a rabbi. And she called out Jews as part of the ownership class, taking away other opportunities. And why is she talking about the other opportunities? Because Jews are complaining, along with other people, about opening the schools. Wait a minute. If I'm opening the schools, how am I taking away opportunities for poor people, especially when Jews who are upper class can afford to get tutors and get their kids in private schools, and the pandemic did not hit them. And it's the poor people who want the schools, who need the schools open, and she's complaining about Jews blocking it. You understand the twist. I don't. So with that thought in mind, I said, well, if that's the case, now let's go to what is happening here in education. Let me close this down. Going to go and stop the share for a second, right? And go to my, that's it, here we go. And I'll put the spotlight on you, Richard, and let you solve these problems for us. Give me 1 second. Trying to get this to spotlight you. That's it. No, yeah, spotlight. There we go, Richard. So
there he is.
Okay, so I put you on the spotlight now. So the first thing I wanted to, I saw this Randy Weingarten, I said, okay, she's really Jewish. She's got good Jewish credentials and so on, but going off on this tangent. And, if a Representative Green says about Rothschild lasers, okay, it's one thing. But if somebody Jewish says Jews are part of the white overlord, oh, wait a minute, what's happening? So then I said, well, look, in California, we've got this curriculum coming up. And it's ethnic studies, which sounds like it should be something very nice. I'd like everybody to know Black background, Hispanic background, Asian background in California, Armenian, everybody. But it's so controversial. So now I'll leave that to you to explain what this means and why it's controversial. Go ahead, it's yours.
So first of all, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is always good to be with you. And it's always a joy to be able to speak to the congregation that my father-in-law, Alex Satmari, loved so much, and so dutifully sat in that front row opposite you, Rabbi Norbert, every Shabbat. So in many respects, I feel like I'm carrying forward the Alex Satmari Public Affairs series with each wonderful opportunity to be with you all, and it's always a joy. And there's always plenty for us to talk about. We never seem to have any shortage of topics that are relevant, that are timely, and that are troubling. And you're sharing that very unfortunate and regrettable comment from Randy Weingarten of just 2 days ago is indicative of how words have an impact. And we've all come through an unimaginable, unprecedented, and extremely difficult and tragic year. Thankfully, it's a Shehechianu moment. We're here. We are able to look and contemplate in a very real way what the world may begin to look like as we see glimmers of hope and light in the months ahead. And certainly the opening of our public schools and for in-person instruction in learning is a milestone moment, but something that, like everything, as we contemplate the reopening and the reemergence of the new normal in our daily lives, we have to do it carefully, thoughtfully, cautiously, because the last thing any of us want is to go backwards. And so these debates are personal, and these discussions are strike very deeply at the way we live our lives. But there is no place whatsoever, unequivocally, for the kind of comment and rhetoric and ugly stereotyping that was reflected, albeit unintentionally, in Randy Weingarten's comments. And so the floor is hers to correct the record and to pull back and to clarify. And we're waiting. Our ears are open, our minds are open, and we hope that there will be something corrective that is put on the record very soon. With respect to ethnic studies in California, this has been, to use the term of art, a real balagan over the last, 2.5 years. What began, to your point, Rabbi, in earnest as what should have been a laudable effort to fully reflect the rich diversity of our great state, all of its diversity and cultural heritage that makes California such an extraordinary place, not just in America, but in the world. More than 90 languages being spoken, just this rich stew and simmering with life and richness and vibrancy, place of cultural diversity. That's not, sadly, what became what was undertaken and what was afoot with the crafting of a model ethnic studies curriculum. Just to take a step back, the California legislature in 2016 passed a law calling upon the State Board of Education to create a model ethnic studies curriculum. And a couple of years later, a working group went on with that task. And when I arrived, when Susan and I arrived in LA at the end of August in 2019, that was just the moment when the first draft of this model curriculum was revealed to the public. And it landed with a colossal thud, because it was nothing of the sort that we would have hoped and that we would have aspired to in this great state. Instead, it was an outgrowth of what's known as the critical ethnic studies movement. It has its anchor in the turbulence of the 1960s, coming out of San Francisco State University and other campuses, and holds to a very rigid ideological point of view, which is as follows: that the American experience for Native Americans, African Americans, Latino Americans, and Asian Americans is one of systemic racism and discrimination and oppression. And unless you fit into one of those four very clearly and rigidly defined boxes, you are, we are, by definition, oppressors of those groups. It is an absolutely antagonistic and adversarial and negative way of what should be, teaching about and appreciating our unique differences and the value that each of us bring to this state, and the unique and distinct narratives of achievement and oppression that so many other groups have faced throughout their history, in America, certainly, and in other places around the world. So this first draft was roundly condemned and appropriately criticized. The State Board of Education then called upon these original writers and a few others to make it better, to go about creating a curriculum that is something that we could all be proud of. Now, ideologically and philosophically, that first draft may have been the moment where groups like AJC, ADL, Stand With Us, IAC, you name it, the whole, the Jewish Federation, the alphabet soup of Jewish communal life, could have and would have been in their right minds to say, this is not fixable. This is so off the mark, it needs to be scrapped. Let's start fresh. That's not the position we took. Instead, there was a sense of, okay, we know where we're starting from. Let's try to make this better. And over the course of the next 2 years, I would argue that we made together, collectively and successfully, many significant improvements to the subsequent drafts. This included the removal of boycott, divestment, and sanctions from BDS, as it's known, from that first draft. It included the introduction of 2 distinct lesson plans about the Jewish experience, about the experience in America and about the experience of the Mizrahi, Eastern Jewish community, Jews of color, the diversity and richness of the Jewish experience, that we are not all, forgive me, white and privileged. The original version put the Jewish community in the same class, in the same category as Irish Americans who came to this country, overcame a little bit of hardship, made their way, end of story. Nothing could be further from the truth. So we now have lesson plans about the Jewish experience. We now have the universally accepted International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism embedded into this curriculum. So it's better. It's not great. The State Board of Education passed and adopted what was the 4th version of this curriculum just last month. I can tell you that the original drafters of that terribly flawed initial version have gone publicly on record to say they want nothing to do with what it looks like now. So there's a bit of victory and achievement that we can take some comfort in knowing we helped to make possible. But these folks haven't gone off into the sunset. They're still around. And now that the state has gone on record accepting this current iteration as the working draft, as the framework for teaching ethnic studies in California public schools, our work takes on a different dimension. We're now in the next phase, and that next phase means we have to be engaged in the teacher training that takes place up and down the state. We need to be communicating with school boards up and down the state to be sure that they bring the best of materials into their classrooms. And so in many respects, the fight has really just begun, and we're in a better place than we were certainly 2 years ago. But there's still tremendous work to be done. This is far from where it should be, where it should have been, where it should have gotten to, but the real test is ahead of us.
It strikes me that we have a fight here between what has been, let's say, the classical position of the Jewish community, which has been liberal, social oriented, social policy oriented, and the Marxist, post-Marxist movement, Angela Davis wing of the old Trotskyites, I don't know, revived, maybe I'll put it that way. And they are dominating the education establishment. Like even Randy Weingarten should have known better, and she's fallen into this Kool-Aid drink. And that's what's very worrisome, because they're educating our young leaders. That's
and part of what's happening also is all of this. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So all of this is now coming to the fore. 1 year after the terrible jolt to our society caused by the brutal murder of George Floyd, and we've been riveted over this last week or two by the murder trial of Officer Chauvin, and that continues for however long, another week, another two. We pray. I can't be impartial about this. I pray for the correct verdict in this case, because I don't want to imagine. I will need to imagine, as a Jewish communal professional and leader, what might be in store should it go in a different way. But we have to hope that justice will prevail here. But my point is that all of this ethnic studies and cancel culture dimension that we see is happening amidst the backdrop of the social justice movements of the last year. That's not to cast aspersions on well-meaning people who took to the streets and peacefully protested, and do indeed hope that we will see some redress to systemic racism and bigotry in our society, particularly against the African American community. We see it more recently in the terrible episodes and hate crimes against our Asian American brothers and sisters. There's work to be done, but it can't be done in a way that castigates other people of conscience and communities who care deeply about the well-being of our society, and that includes the Jewish community. We have to be equal partners in this shared struggle.
Yeah, in other words, we don't want to be thrown under the bus for anybody's agenda. So with that, I want to just move over here quickly and just show this quickly, move up. And now this is going back to a report in 2019 from the American Jewish Community, Survey of American Jews on Anti-Semitism in America. And frankly, we're pretty much scared. 88% of us in the survey thought it was a problem. I never felt that way previously. I've been active, involved, old enough to know things back to the 60s, and never had a point where I felt the Jewish community really felt worried or threatened about anti-Semitism. There were problems that had to be resolved. The feeling is so much different. So now, on top of this report, that was out in October of 2019, and we've gone through now more than a year of lockdowns and quarantines. And, there are those who consider a Jewish plot. And, we're concerned, what parts of the American population, what percentage really do buy into this idea of the Jews as an Unglück, as the Nazis said about us, our misfortune, dangerous cabal? How much of the American population really buys into the idea that Jews are the oppressive system, responsible for keeping whites and blacks and is keeping everybody down, Randy Weingarten aside, right? So where does the American public really stand on this?
So it's a great question. I will tell you that this survey, the initial survey in 2019, was conducted and released in the run-up to what was the first anniversary of the horrific tragedy, the anti-Semitic violent murderous rampage that took place at Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. That was a jarring moment for the American Jewish community. That was the worst expression of anti-Jewish violence in American history. It was stated as such at the time, and that indeed, I would argue, holds true to this day. And so this was a survey of about 1,400 American Jews from all backgrounds, all geographic locales, and it was an attempt to take the pulse, to get a sense on how are we feeling as a community. There seemed to be a sense of unease about where we stood, and especially having seen that veneer of protection completely shattered by Pittsburgh, the events in Pittsburgh. And so that was the first survey. We then took a second polling, asked the same set of questions to a different set of respondents, a different audience, 1 year later. So the second survey was released in 2020, and most of those numbers held true, that roughly 9 out of 10 American Jews are concerned about anti-Semitism, that roughly 1 in 3 have experienced some form of anti-Semitism themselves over the last 5 years. For most, it's verbal harassment, or for some, it's in the online sphere, where it's much easier for a perpetrator to be anonymous and be cowardly, additionally cowardly. And for some, it has even taken on that physical manifestation, a much smaller number who have been targeted in that way. Roughly a fourth of American Jews responded that the institutions that they belong to, JCCs, synagogues, and the like, have also been targeted for anti-Semitism. So a real sense of unease that's out there. What we did that was different in 2020 was that, in addition to polling that same number of American Jews, we also asked the same set of questions to the general public to get a sense of how are non-Jews perceiving and seeing issues of anti-Semitism. And for the most part, the results aren't too troubling. And that's a subjective judgment, but I want to just share, a couple of the compare and contrast aspects of this. And I'm going to go to my notes, because it's not all in the Kepler right now. One of the questions that I thought was very interesting was that and it was posed to the general public, that roughly 2/3 of non-Jews who were asked about defining an incident as anti-Semitic or having anti-Semitic overtones, 65% said it would really make no difference to them if a Jewish person or a Jewish organization considered, sort of, gave that hecture that particular act was anti-Semitic. Now, I have colleagues that will say that's a terrible revelation, that 2/3 would say it doesn't matter. I've always tended to be more of a glass half full person, and I think there's another way to actually read that, and that is even to give a little bit of credit to our non-Jewish citizens and brothers and sisters in America, that they can see it and opine on it and recognize it when they see it, and don't necessarily need a Jewish friend or colleague to say, yes, indeed, that's anti-Semitism. A couple of ways to slice that. I think it's a good conversation starter, most definitely. The other piece I'll share is that, just to the basic question of viewing anti-Semitism as a problem that's getting worse, 88% of American Jews, that nearly 9 out of 10 that you cited, Rabbi, see that as such. The non-Jewish public, the number is 63%. Here too, for a community that, for argument's sake, is not thinking about anti-Semitism on a daily basis and not necessarily worried about being targeted by anti-Semites on a daily basis, 63%, I would argue, not so bad. There's actually certainly room for us to educate and continue to raise awareness, but 63% see anti-Semitism as a problem that's getting worse. Among the general public, there's at least a baseline level of awareness and understanding and sensitivity to the subject. And so, by and large, I'll share just a couple other nuggets in all of this. That if somebody were to say Israel has no right to exist and view that through the lens of anti-Semitism, the numbers are 85% of American Jews. Yes, that's anti-Semitic. To say that Israel has no right to exist. You can choose to disagree with a particular governmental policy. You can like Netanyahu. You don't have to like Netanyahu. But by and large, Israel has a right to exist. So for those who say it doesn't, American Jews would say, 85% of American Jews would say that's anti-Semitism. 74% of the American public generally would agree with the Jewish community. So there too, I think there's something that we can be hopeful about. And then just bringing it back to the fact that we've just observed Yom HaShoah and thinking about generally the need for Holocaust education and general awareness of the Holocaust. And it's always, again, a joy to see Joe here. And I meant to say hello earlier to you, Joe.
Hi, Eddie.
Hi there. 99% of American Jews have some knowledge of the Holocaust. And we would, I think, expect that number. And I want to hope that's 99 point something, that we are, as close to 100% as we can be. 75% of the general public have knowledge as well about the Holocaust. That to me is a very encouraging sign. It's a reflection of the good work that the LA Holocaust Museum and its Speakers Bureau, led by Joe and others, and museums in Skokie and New York City and other places have done to encourage education. And so I think there's a lot of hope there. There's a lot of room for optimism. The other just sort of nugget that I'll share from this is that to the extent that there is a degree of ignorance about the Jewish community and about anti-Semitism, that tends to skew among the younger population, people aged 19 to 29. At the same time, that's a population, that's a segment of the population that appears most open to learning and receiving these messages and being taught and being engaged with Jewish friends and associates to become better educated. So it's, on balance, I think there are some mixed signals with this report. There is absolutely a degree of unease and discomfort. One of the other elements that I didn't mention is that roughly 3 out of 5 American Jews have gone out of their way to conceal their Jewish identity when in public. So if you typically wear a kippah in the home, you might remove it when you're out and about. And so that's a troubling dimension as well. All of this means our work is cut out for us. I will share as well that this second survey, which was released in early November of last year, predated the election and predated, of course, the insurrection and all of the extremist hate elements that have become much more visible and much more prominent in our society. The good news there is that when they come out from under their rock, when we shine, the light of sunlight and inspection upon them and exposure upon them, that helps us. That helps it. Better that it be out in the open. Better that we can educate law enforcement. Better that we can educate the public education system. Better that we can reach out and talk about this with people in America who care, people like us who want to see America fulfill its promise as a safe haven for all. So, very long answer to your question. It's difficult to condense, the survey into quick sound bites, but I wanted to give everyone at least a flavor of what we have found.
And then I had one last question, and we'll call for a day. These are very good, important answers you've put up. And that is to move overseas towards Israel. Whatever you think about the Trump administration, certainly there were major moves in terms of diplomatic relations between Israel and important Arab countries, the United Arab Emirates being the prime example. More countries from Africa officially opening relations, even moving embassies to Israel, moves like that. Now, new administration, in Hebrew say metateh chadash metateh tov, new broom is a good broom, sweeps out everything from before. And I think Biden emotionally, I think, is friendly to Jews and to the Jewish people. He's got a Jewish daughter-in-law, right? So, and then Secretary of State Blinken is a child of Holocaust survivors. But is there a return to the coldness that was under President Obama, where definitely there was the daylight shone between the United States and Israel? Is there a return to maybe a bipartisan support for Israel that had historically been and was starting to fall apart, especially with the younger, the young generation did not know Joseph among the Democrats?
I think the point you made, Rabbi, about President Biden having that sense of connection and warmth toward Israel is really the key to how American policy toward its closest and most significant ally will play out throughout this term and hopefully beyond. It is a different administration. There is a different outlook in terms of investment in trying to once and for all resolve the outstanding issues between Israel and the Palestinians. But there is very much a commitment to continuing the normalization, the breakthrough of relations between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain and others that have since followed. I had the great privilege just 2 evenings ago of hosting a webinar, and for the very first time, the Consul General of the UAE, here based in Los Angeles, Haza Al-Kabi, and the Consul General of Israel, Hillel Newman, shared a stage, shared the virtual platform, and we spent an hour talking about the tremendous promise that the normalization in relations have, that it holds for the future. And make no mistake, this may not have been part of the headlines when the normalization took place and when the signing of the Abraham Accords took place on the White House lawn last fall. But the UAE sees itself as being helpful and being a factor of encouraging the resolution of outstanding issues between Israel and the Palestinians. I believe that's a good thing because I believe they are genuine and sincere about this. So we will see, I think we will see an attempt to bring the Palestinians back into the fold. The Biden administration has released and restored again aid, humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. It's very important that there be safeguards built in so that such aid does not turn into schoolroom textbooks that vilify and negate Israel's right to exist. That's something very important. One of our own congresspeople from Southern California, Brad Sherman, has just introduced a bill in the House that would build in those guardrails and those safeguards. That's very important. But aid is important because it's, as long as it goes to the purpose for which it is intended, to bring that population forward and encourage the Palestinian leadership, whatever it may be, to to come forward and come back to the negotiating table. One other area of great concern is the potential of America returning to the joint agreement with Iran, the JCPOA. And there were talks just this last week to begin to set some preconditions for the possible return of the U.S. And the restoring of that agreement. The Biden administration has called for an agreement that is, I think the term that was used is longer and stronger, ultimately. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. It's very important. AJC is among the Jewish organizations on record saying that bad behavior ought not be rewarded and that the Iranians need to cease some of their bad behavior before sanctions against them could be lifted or would be lifted. And we have to be very clear-eyed and sober about this entering in potentially again with the regime. And so that's an area of great concern. And it's something in which we are in regular communication with Secretary of State Blinken and the administration. And again, personally, I have faith in our president. I believe he is genuine. He has met with many Israeli prime ministers through the years. There is an unshakable bond. That's the difference. Just that, in my view, that's the difference between warmth and something less than warmth. And President Obama and the Obama administration, notwithstanding some of the back of the hand, cold shoulder, actually secured tremendous strategic support and security for Israel through the 8 years of the Obama administration. It was a curious and puzzling and I think unfortunate move literally in the last days of the Obama administration to allow a critical resolution to pass through the UN and to not exert and assert the United States veto, because I think that did a disservice to what actually on balance was a very laudable record of support for Israel. Even if that inherent warmth and neshama wasn't there, the right things were done. And I think, again, it's an editorial comment on my part. I don't think it was a wise move in the waning days of the Obama administration. Yeah, but we need to be clear-eyed about the Middle East, and I think we need to give the administration a chance to get it right.
Okay, Richard, I want to thank you very much. I think in discussing these issues and the work AJC is doing, trying to make sure that we come to a society that is able to work out its problems at the voting booth and in the negotiating tables, and not by sticks and stones and guns. That's how we give a tribute to the memory of those who we lost during the Holocaust and the Shoah.
Rob,
so I want to thank you.
May I say something?
Go ahead.
I was just smiling when you said to work out differences at the voting booth. For it to be able to be worked out at the voting booth, we have to allow everyone to vote.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in for a moment, that's such an important point. I can assure you that one of the pieces of legislation on which AJC will be advocating and is advocating is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in Congress. What is taking place in Georgia these days is beyond contempt and is
Not
clearly
just Georgia. You see what's happening in Texas.
To disenfranchise voters.
Not just Georgia. There's Texas. There's Arizona. There's Nevada. It just goes on and on and on. And I need not say more.
Well, we need to get our two parties talking to each other again, also, in order for things to work. That's it. Yeah, very much so. All right, Richard, anything else you want to add for us?
Again, it's always a pleasure to to share and have this special time together. I would simply say, please continue to pay close attention to legislation that's coming forward in Congress. The No Hate Act was just reintroduced. So many of these initiatives, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and other pieces. Congressman Ted Lieu just introduced a bill on Friday that would make it easier for federal hate crime prosecutions to take hold. If many of these measures sound familiar to you, it's because they were previously introduced, typically sailed through the House of Representatives, and were left to languish in the Senate. Now that we have different leadership in place, there's an opportunity for these important measures to find their way into law. Not everything should be done through executive order, and I think President Biden knows that, notwithstanding the measure that the executive order on guns and illegal and illicit guns that was enacted just in recent days. That too, an important step, but I'm encouraged that we may very well see Congress get something done in this term, and it's important that we stay aware, write letters, make calls. It really does matter when our voices are heard.
Okay, Richard, I want to thank you very much, and to you and to all of our people here. I'm going to just go over here. Let me get this so we can get everybody here. Hold on. I'm going to take the camera on. Move the camera to everybody here. 1 second. That's it. Should be able to see everybody. Remove spotlight. Where is this view? Gallery view. All right. I hope we can see everybody here. Okay, so to everybody, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And
Shabbat Shalom.
okay, and
Shabbat
get people
Shalom.
to
Thank you,
work
Richard,
and
as always.
work
Well
together.
done.
Shabbat Shalom.
Be well and be safe.
Richard, good to see you, Richard.
Always
Thank
good to see you, Joe. I look forward to seeing you at the museum soon.
Yeah,
Okay.
Joshua Clark always.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you all.
And at the better tempo.
Okay. Bye bye.